Ahoy hoy fellow bookworms, my name is Caroline and I like to read books, so let's talk about them. I recently did a clean out of my shelves because it's a new year and I realized there were a lot of books on my shelves that just don't need to be there anymore, so this is actually quite a large unhaul. Most of the books that I'm getting rid of today fit pretty easily into one of three categories for why I'm getting rid of them. The first is that when I read it, I just really didn't like it. The second is that when I read it, I just found it pretty mediocre. Like, it was okay, but I'm never gonna reread it, I'm never gonna recommend it to friends, so I may as well donate it so that someone else can enjoy it instead of it just gathering dust on my shelves. Third category is for books that have been on my shelves for 2 years or more, and once upon a time I was really excited to read them, but I've just lost interest in them, or they've been there for so long that I've realized I'm never going to read them. That's enough of an introduction though. I've got like 20 something books here and I'm gonna try and be pretty speedy. The first two books I'm getting rid of are Throne of Glass and Illuminate in the paperback editions, and that's just because I have both of these in the hardcovers now. Next up, I'm getting rid of two books by Patrick Ness, so we have The Rest of Us Just Live Here and More Than This. I've mentioned a few times that Patrick Ness is an author whose books I just don't really love. I gave this one 2 stars and I gave this one 3 stars. They were just okay for me, so I'm sure someone else will enjoy them a lot more than I did. I'm also getting rid of the entire Maze Runner series by James Dashner. I loved the Maze Runner series, excluding the Kill Order, because that was fucking terrible. But the trilogy, I really enjoyed. I thought it was fun. I liked that each book went in a new direction, but that was a really unpopular opinion. Everyone fucking hated this series. Not me. I thought it was great. I'm just never gonna go back to this series, which is a shame because at one point this series made me so happy, but my reading tastes have kind of changed and this is no longer where I'm at. Next up we have The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold, and I don't really have a huge amount to say about this book. I liked it more than I liked the movie, but that's not really saying much because I fucking hated the movie. This was kind of entertaining, but again, it's just not a book that I'm ever gonna pick up again or like recommend to any of my friends or anything like that, so it's going. This next book was a massive impulse purchase, and It's Me Being Me is exactly as insane as You Being You by Todd Hassack-Lowy. That was a massive mouthful to say. I was really intrigued by this book because it's written entirely in lists and that sounded like a really cool concept, but then I realized that it's quite large and I was like, the thrill of a cool concept is probably gonna wear off before the halfway mark. Suddenly it's 2 years later and I've just completely lost interest. So it's going. Next up is Fallen Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. I've made no secret of my dislike for this book. I can see why people like it because it's a mildly entertaining fantasy, but it just wasn't the book for me. I didn't like the world building or the lack of. I did consider continuing the series because people told me it improved, and that's why I kept it on my shelf for so long, but I've just talked so much shit about this book that I kind of just want it gone. May as well keep things going with a few of my other unpopular opinions. I'm also unhauling The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. I know so many people love this book, but I just wasn't a fan of the romance. I think the writing was nice. I didn't like how quickly the two main characters fell in love, and that just kind of ruined things for me, and I didn't like the ending, and I don't want to continue the series, so I am getting rid of this one. Next up we have All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. I have a lot of thoughts on this book, but basically they can be summarized as I wasn't happy that the two main characters were nothing more than their mental illnesses. Like, their characters were both just depressed person, and I just really didn't like that. I thought it was really uncool. Not a fan at all of this book, so I don't want it on my shelf anymore. I'm also getting rid of two books by a lot of people's favorite author, Rainbow Rowell, so I'm getting rid of Eleanor and Park and Carry On. I didn't like Carry On because there was so much background information we didn't know. It's like joining in the Harry Potter series at the 7th book. I couldn't get attached to anyone because there was so much I didn't know about them, so it was really not enjoyable. Eleanor and Park, I didn't mind when I read it, like it was okay, but it was just one of those books that I felt meh about. Like, I didn't like it, I didn't dislike it, it was just okay, so they're both going because I didn't particularly enjoy either of them. Next up is Winger by Andrew Smith. This book was really popular a couple of years ago. I remember seeing it everywhere and that made me pick it up, and I ended up fucking hating it. And I can see why people like it because it's a coming of age story, but it just wasn't the coming of age story for me because I didn't find any of the characters relatable, so I ended up just completely disliking it, and so I'm getting rid of it. Next book to go is Dumplin' by Julie Murphy. I've mentioned this a few times on my channel, but I wanted it to be a really body positive book, and instead it just wasn't. I wasn't a fan of the main character at all because I found her really hypocritical and rude and stuff like that, and I know a lot of people have really enjoyed this and found it relatable and stuff like that, which is great, but it just wasn't the book for me, so I'm getting rid of it. It feels so good to be getting rid of all these books. Okay, next is The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein. This was kind of a cute story because it was told from the perspective of a dog, but so much of it was about car racing, and somehow the dog was obsessed with car racing, which was kind of weird, and I'm never gonna reread it. Ever. These two books I got in OWL crates at some point, and I found both of them pretty average when I read them. So there's Trouble Is a Friend of Mine by Stephanie Trumley and The Night We Said Yes by Lauren Gibaldi. Both of these were okay. This one's kind of like a mystery story, and this one's kind of a contemporary story. Again, I'm just never gonna reread them because they were pretty average, so getting rid of them. Next up is The Serpent King by Jeff Xena, and I had kind of mixed feelings when I read this because I enjoyed the story and it was kind of powerful and stuff, but I really didn't like the characters. I thought they were so fucking annoying. So I kind of kept it on my shelf because I enjoyed it a little bit, but I ended up getting rid of it, and this is gonna sound really bad, but because the spine is a really annoying color and it didn't fit properly with my rainbow, I was like, you know what? That's the tipping point, is that I didn't really enjoy it so much that I want to keep it. I was like, it's ruining my rainbow, it has to go. Next I have another two books that I got in OWL crates ages ago, except with these two, I never read them because I just completely lost interest. So the first one is Everland by Wendy Spinelli, which is a Peter Pan retelling that has a steampunk twist or something like that. And the other one is Flawed by Cecilia Ahern, which is a dystopian novel that's the first in a duology or something like that. And both of these sounded really good when I first got them, but then they just sat on my shelf and I lost interest, and now I'm not interested at all. So gonna give them to someone who will be more interested. The final book that I'm unhauling is Slasher Girls and Monster Boys by a whole bunch of YA authors, and this is a short story anthology with a like horror twist to it. And I quite enjoyed this when I read it. Horror is not something I usually read, and there were a couple of stories in here that I really liked and quite a few that I didn't really like, but it wasn't really a book that I ever reached for again. There were no stories in there that I ever went back to or anything like that. It was just, I read it and I was like, okay, cool, and that was it. It was just okay. That brings us to the end of this unhaul video though, guys. That was incredibly therapeutic and I feel great, and my shelves look great too. I upload videos Wednesdays, Saturdays, and sometimes Mondays as well, so be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Toodaloo.